Bom, boa noite todo mundo. Obrigada de vocês estarem aqui nessa noite fria. Eu queria primeiro pedir um favor para vocês. Eu sei que a gente está diante de duas estrelas aqui, mas eles têm um compromisso depois, então a gente resolveu que ia começar assim no horário, e depois, quando acabar, nós vamos fazer uma foto coletiva para todo mundo. Eu não vou conseguir permitir que todo mundo fique tirando foto individual, não dá para a gente fazer isso, porque muita gente, eles têm de fato um compromisso depois. Então eu peço a compreensão de vocês, tá bom? Bom, vamos lá. Eu queria apresentar para vocês o programa Pretzel Talks. É um programa desenvolvido pela Sinagoga Beth-El, um projeto que promove encontros com pessoas de trajetórias extraordinárias e conversas que tiram a gente do automático, que surpreendem. Esse é o Pretzel Talks. Eu ia sugerir que vocês seguissem a gente nas redes sociais, porque os avisos das próximas palestras são todas publicadas lá, para que vocês não percam os próximos entrevistados, que normalmente a gente tem pessoas muito, muito bacanas sendo entrevistadas. Então, passamos para a apresentação. Shep Gordon é um produtor lendário, responsável por lançar nomes como Alice Cooper, Blondie, Luther Vandross, e foi ele que criou o conceito de chefe celebridade, impulsionando nomes importantes como Anthony Bourdain, e ele é judeu, mas foi quase um monge budista. O que ele tem para contar aqui para a gente é muito, muito, muito bacana. Alice Cooper revolucionou o rock com seus shows teatrais e ousados. Ele é o ícone da cultura pop e também um apaixonado por pintura e golfe. Ele é um grande jogador de golfe e costuma dizer que o esporte salvou a sua vida. E temos aqui também o Binho, o Ruben Feffer, que é conhecido como Binho, um compositor, diretor musical premiado. Fundou a Ultrasom Music, que ele hoje lidera junto com a Flávia, né? E o trabalho dele novo, Viva a Vida, o filme estreou agora na Netflix. Eu assisti já 2 vezes, eu recomendo, é um filme muito bacana. E ele comanda agora o estúdio ao lado da esposa e será agora o moderador dessa conversa, que promete muito. Binho, é com você.
Boa noite, eu vou mudar para inglês aqui. I'm going to switch into English now. I think we have translation available. Welcome everybody, good evening. I'm so glad, I'm really honored to be here in this place, in this time and place with these people. When I was invited, it was very thrilling for me. I have never done this kind of talk. Even so with you guys, especially like that, and it's a very special moment for me. I'm really happy about the situation, and I would like to thank so much Isabel for inviting me and structuring all the event, and also my friend Tosi, cadê Tosi? Here, Luis Tosi, who really helped with all the questions and reasoning for getting the best, and he also helped set up this amazing exhibition of all his memorabilia, all his items that he has collected for more than 30 years, I think. It's amazing. He's been to all your shows, probably. So I'd like to start really welcoming everybody. And the first question that comes to mind is really, have you ever did an interview inside a synagogue?
This will be our first synagogue. Yeah. But we plan on doing many more. This would be our very first one. Shep and I have been together 55 years. And we do colleges sometimes. We'll go and talk at colleges because it's very unusual, for a manager and an artist to be together for 55 years and never had an argument.
I was going to tell the story of what got us together. It's very fitting that we tell this in a synagogue. I had come out to Los Angeles. Alice migrated to Los Angeles as a young man from Phoenix. I migrated as a probation officer to Los Angeles County. And I worked one day as a probation officer and quit and checked into a motel, and my next door neighbor was Jimi Hendrix. And Jimmy asked me, what do you do for a living? And I said, I don't really have a job. And he said, are you Jewish? And I said, yeah. And he said, you should be a manager. And he introduced me to Alice. So it's very fitting we're in a synagogue today, 55 years later, having this talk.
Is this your first time in a synagogue?
Yes, I think it is the first time in a synagogue. You guys don't mind if I'm Christian, right? I'm in a synagogue. My dad was a pastor. My grandfather was a pastor. So I grew up in a Christian home. And that's what makes even the more unique thing about Shep and I, is that being 55 years, we still don't have a contract with each other. We have no contract. Yeah. It's all based just on trust, you know. And to me, that's the way it should be. Yeah. I mean, we trust each other, and that's it. We have never once had an argument. Out of all the tours, out of all the albums, out of all the craziness in rock and roll, he says something, and I go, okay.
Shep says, let's do an interview in a synagogue. You go, okay.
It's very unique in our business, yeah.
Great.
And I have my manager standing behind me. He's pulling the strings.
The manager of the manager.
Manager Benjamin.
Who managers? So my next question, especially for you, Alice, it's about Brazil, because you were the first major international rock star to play in Brazil in 1974. It was the first time that Brazil opened to an international rock concert. And tell us, what do you remember from that chaotic, historic night?
You know, it must have been very unusual for the Brazilians, because a normal rock band gets up and plays their songs, and that's normal. We are anything but normal. And they got the most extreme show for the very first show that we showed up. And the building is 8 times bigger than Madison Square Garden. It was 158,000 people indoors, which was a Guinness Book of Records for the biggest indoor audience ever. So if 158,000 people just do this, it's a roar. I was standing behind a row of amps the size of this wall and couldn't hear anything, because the audiences were so loud. Now, the funny part was, I think it's something like 50% of people that live under the equator believe in Macumba, which is Catholicism and voodoo and all this other stuff going on. And I get up on stage and, you know, I've got the makeup on and I've got a big boa constrictor and I'm doing this show. And the next day in the paper, there's a picture this big and it just says, Macumba. I'd walk down the street and people were like, oh, yeah, Macumba. You know, it should have said Baptist, you know, probably. But I mean, we really did kind of initiate the Brazilian audience into rock and roll. I mean, it was really, we weren't expecting.
No, it was scary. It was a time when...
It was a time of dictatorship.
A dictatorship here. So the army was the security force at the show. And they had never seen an audience react like this. And it panicked them. So about 20 minutes into the show, they lined the whole front of the stage with machine guns and stopped Alice from playing until the crowd sort of calmed down. We had never experienced anything like that.
The last thing we wanted was the crowd to calm down.
We went, come on, get crazy. But it was
the most memorable concert, I think, of the 5,000 concerts we've done. Yeah.
The guy who invited you, was he a fan? Did he know, or did he just pick the most outrageous thing he would find?
I don't really remember. We got an offer to come. And it was more money than we had ever made. And so we came.
Yeah.
And it was promoted by TV Globo.
Oh.
And they put Alice on the cover of the magazine 2 issues in a row and had a lot of television ads, which was, we didn't know at the time, but that was really the power. That's what drove the audience. It was a place called the A&B Hall, which was...
A&B.
A&B, like in the alphabet.
Oh, A and B.
And it had like tractor and farm equipment shows in it. It was a big exhibition hall.
In Rio.
Yeah, low
It was in
ceiling.
Rio.
I think there were 3 babies born during the show.
Yeah, probably were. No seats.
It was a city. I mean, it was a.
Wow. And now you're back to Brazil 50 years later.
Yeah.
How did it feel? How do you feel Brazil has changed, and what are your expectations now for this
No more
show?
machine guns, I don't
No
think.
more, yeah, hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully. Yeah.
An audience, an audience reacts to what you give them. Yeah, if you get up on stage and you just play your songs and everything, that's nice. They'll react. If you do an entire production and really show the audience that you're going to give them everything you've got, then they react. All over the world is like that.
Brazil has great audiences too.
Oh,
I mean,
very
really
good
great
audiences here. We can't wait to do the show.
The last time Alice was here was with the Hollywood Vampires, which is a group that he also fronts that has Johnny Depp in it. And we played Rock in Rio to 100,000 people. And it was another great experience. That was our.
It was funny for Johnny Depp because Johnny's a great guitar player. And I knew he was a great guitar player. And Joe Perry from Aerosmith was our other guitar player. And then our bass players from Guns N' Roses. All of the guys in the band had been in front of at least of 100,000s of people before, except Johnny. Johnny got up there and, he goes, he looked at this audience, it was just a sea of people. And I told him, I said, what's the difference between playing for 100 people or 100,000? It's the same show. I said, you're an actor, pretend,
He's been in screens.
Here's your part. You're a rock guitar player. Okay.
I remember Duff, the bass player from Guns N' Roses, right before they get on stage, said, "Hey Johnny, it's just another day at the office."
I told him, I said, you can drown in 100,000 feet of water or 1 foot of water. What's the difference? Just do the show. And he was great. I mean, Johnny's an actually very, very good guitar player. He's as good as anybody around.
That's interesting. So let's go back a little bit to the original story. So after you said, okay, I'm Jewish, I can be a manager, how does that turn into being in the music business and knowing how that happens, how that works?
Well, I think from my point of view, what Alice was doing very unique music. It wasn't music that radio would play at the time. It was very different. It was more in the Frank Zappa mold. And I knew nothing about music, and I knew nothing about being a manager. But what I did, when I went to the New School for Social Research and for a year, and one of my courses, a teacher had talked about what was the common thread of musical phenomenons during the last century. And what they all had in common was that parents hated them. Elvis Presley was disgusting and sexy. They wouldn't show his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show. The Beatles had long hair. They were disgusting. The Rolling Stones urinated on gas stations. So Alice and I sat down and talked and said, we may not know how to make a record for radio, but we know how to really irritate parents. And that's sort of that was our goal. And then we got lucky and met Bob Ezren, a producer who made sense out of the music and made it radio friendly.
Yeah.
Very cool. And how about when you came up with your name and makeup and all the theatrical, how did that come up? And was that part of a plan, or was it more organically evolved?
The band had already been, something in the band was theatrical. Even when we were in high school, we had a theatrical kind of thing that happened within the band that was more exciting than other bands. I don't know what it was. And I kind of looked out and said, we have all these rock heroes. The Beatles are heroes. The Stones are heroes. Everybody's a hero. Where are the villains? And I went, I'll gladly be the villain. So out of all the Peter Pans, I got to be Captain Hook. And it was very easy to do. If you do an album called Welcome to My Nightmare, give them the nightmare. Don't just say it, but do the production. And we did, Shep and I put all of our money into the production and created this Broadway play called Welcome to My Nightmare. And the more the parents hated it, the bigger we got. Now, the funniest one was, we're playing the Toronto Peace Festival. Okay, Shep organized it. They came in, they got Shep to organize it because he knew what he was doing in Toronto. He got John Lennon and Yoko Ono, and he got the Doors at the prime time in their life. And they said, well, how much do you want to get paid? And he goes, I want my band to go on between John Lennon and the Doors at the end. That was his price. So we got up there and did our show, and 50,000 people. And all of a sudden I look down, and there's a chicken on stage. Now, I didn't bring a chicken. You know, I mean, we had these feathers going up, and there's now a chicken. Well, I'm from Detroit. I've never been on a farm in my life, so it had feathers, it had wings, it should fly. Chickens don't fly as much as they plummet. And so I threw the chicken in the audience, and they tore it to pieces. This is the Peace Festival. Now, there's an actual kicker to this whole thing that's even funnier than that. So they threw the parts back up on stage. Next day in the paper, Alice Cooper kills chicken on stage. You know, and I was now the villain of rock and all this. Now, the kicker to this is, I threw the chicken in the audience, and the first 5 rows were all in wheelchairs. They were the ones that killed the chicken, which made it even more bizarre.
Oh, my God.
But that really was the moment that Shep and I realized the audience wants a villain. And I said, I don't mind being the villain as long as the villain has a sense of humor to it. I think that every good...
The chicken didn't think so, but...
Yeah, the chicken didn't think so, but, you know. And there's a great picture of me and Colonel Sanders, you know, who's killed unknown billions of chickens, and I'm the bad
The
guy.
Kentucky Fried Chicken.
It was so ironic. We do press conferences every day, and it was always this thing about, how could you kill a chicken? And we'd say, you drove past 14 fried chicken places. They're killing 10,000 chickens an hour.
I just killed one.
You know, we had one chicken. Come on.
And we didn't even kill it.
Yeah.
But I mean, the thing was, but that held it. Every place we went all over the world, we'd get, before we go on stage, they'd come in and say, you're not going to kill any animals on stage.
ASPCA
Yeah,
came
I
every
was
night.
wondering what happened on the next concert right after that.
ASPCA came every single night for the next 8 or 9 years.
And all we could say was, okay, we promised not to kill any chickens.
Tonight.
We weren't going to kill any chickens anyway.
That's brilliant. I mean, and the name, the story of the name is so interesting.
Well, the name Alice Cooper was when we found out that we were called the Nas, and there was another band called the Nas in Philadelphia, Todd Rundgren's band. And so we said, oh, we got to change our name, you know. Now, we could have changed our name to, since we were so dark, everybody's expecting us to be Black Sabbath or something, one of those names. And I went, let's go the other way. Let's find the most innocent old lady name in America. You know, it could have been Betty Smith or, you know, any. So and the first name I said was, you know, like Alice Cooper. And that stuck. People then, you know, were expecting a blonde folk singer, and they got us, which was part of our sense of humor anyways, you know.
The first time Alice played the Fillmore was opening for Ike and Tina Turner, and Bill Graham thought Alice Cooper was a female folk singer.
Oh, yeah.
And when he saw Alice on stage, he went berserk, threw him off stage, and said, you're never coming back to my stage until we started to sell tickets. And then Bill Graham became the biggest fan of Alice Cooper in America.
Well, and really, the bigger picture of that was some MP in London and England decided that we were the worst thing that could ever happen to England and tried to ban us. The record went right to #1. we sold out every ticket at Wembley.
Yeah.
Because you can't tell an audience they can't see something, because of course they're going to want to go see it. You know, and we kept sending this lady flowers every day, and it kept saying, "Thank you so much." And she's going, "No, I'm trying to ban you." And we go, "Yeah, I know. It's the best thing that's ever happened to us."
Well, the beginning of that story started with us booking England for the first time, and tickets weren't selling. And we knew that if we could irritate parents, tickets would sell. And that for us was in those days you had to buy radio, and we didn't have the money really to buy radio. So we knew if we could figure out how do we rapidly get parents to tell their kids, if you go to the show, you're grounded. Because if they say that, we know we're getting kids coming to the show.
How do you do a Hollywood stunt
Right.
in London?
So there was a fellow named Derek Taylor, who was always called the fifth Beatle. He was a publicist, and he worked at the record company Alice was on. And I went to see him, and I said, you know, we're coming in, we haven't sold tickets. And he didn't really know about Alice. And he said, tell me about Alice. And I said, well, you know, we've sort of made our reputation by irritating parents. And I told him some of the stunts we had done. And I said, is there any way what would be, in America, the Ed Sullivan Show broke Elvis Presley because they wouldn't show his hips on the Ed Sullivan Show. And when they wouldn't show his hips, every parent said, he's disgusting. And I was one of the kids whose parents told me I couldn't go see him, so I went to go see him. So he said, you know, in London, everybody watches the morning news for traffic and weather. Traffic is really a big part of every family in the morning watches it to see which roads to take into town. And I said, really? And where's the busiest intersection? And he said, Piccadilly. That's like the Times Square of New York, or I don't know what, you must have a place here where the most traffic comes. And we had just done a photo. There was a very famous photographer named Richard Avedon. And Rolling Stone magazine commissioned him to do a cover of Alice naked with a snake wrapped around his genitals. So we had that picture. And I said to Derek, you know, we have this great picture. Why don't we get a billboard truck, blow it up, and break the truck down at Piccadilly morning time, and the morning TV show will show, don't drive at Piccadilly because there's this naked guy in a broken down.
Stop traffic in London.
So it stopped traffic
for
26 miles. 3 times the police towed the truck. We drove it back and broke it down again. They finally put the driver in jail.
Next day we were in the front page of the paper.
And the next day this lady brought up in Parliament to ban Alice Cooper. And that, still to this day, England is Alice's biggest market, I think, because of that moment in time. And part of the legend.
Wow, amazing.
Well, and the great thing about it was the British had a great sense of humor. They got it. You know, they're Monty Python, so this was something Monty Python would have done.
They're very Monty Python.
Just the fact that we would have the nerve to break down this naked picture of Alice in London on a Friday at the worst time.
You stuck at the right spot.
Yeah, and Shep and I just went, okay, what part of jail do you want to go to? Because we are going to jail, you know that, right? They never came after us.
Yeah, that was one of my big questions. I mean, that has never backfired, all that strategy?
None of it.
I mean,
Because it could.
It backfired in ways that never really hurt us. We never crossed the line. You can't go to jail for backing up a truck. The driver could get a ticket, but we've done a lot of stunts that come up to the line but never cross the line. But the thing that we don't talk about much is the times we failed, and that was one of the things that Ruben had asked us when we were talking to him.
Yes.
So the follow-up to the billboard truck was we're now coming back to London. It's 2 or 3 years later. Alice is gigantic in London, and we sit down and we say, now we got to pull something off bigger than the truck. What can we do that's bigger than the truck that'll get people really aggravated, make the front pages, get Parliament crazy? So I go back to Derek Taylor, and I don't remember where it came from, but he remembered that 3 or 4 years ago, a balloon had gone up near Big Ben, which was in the air traffic zone, and the fighter jets came and shot down the balloon. And we had just done a big balloon for the Macy's Day Parade of Alice with a gigantic nose, like over-exaggerated nose. So we said, we got it. We'll get a barge. We'll put up the balloon in the no-fly zone. We'll call the police. They'll come with a fighter jet and shoot down the balloon. And there's a hotel called the Savoy Hotel.
Yeah.
And they have these rooms that are right on the river overlooking Big Ben. They call them Riverview Suites. And we rented the room. I remember the number was 516. It was where Charlie Chaplin stayed. And we called all the press in for this historic moment to see the balloon get shot down by the RAF. We didn't tell them why they were there, but that. And we're serving champagne, and the barge comes out, and the balloon starts going up, and Alice and I are like high-fiving ourselves behind the scenes, and the balloon goes up about 5 feet and dips, and the nose goes right in the water.
Spectacular failure.
A spectacular failure. But the failure made the press. They took pictures of Alice's balloon in the water, and it got us halfway to what we wanted.
Yeah, a balloon being shot has already been done.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
The nose dive.
and that sounds outrageous, but this, the more outrageous these things are, the less you have to elaborate on them. We decided that we could not get any attention in Los Angeles. It was just like the Doors owned Los Angeles. So we came up with this idea, why don't we put clear plastic suits on with nothing on underneath them?
No underwear.
No underwear, and Shep will call the police, and they'll come and arrest us, and we'll get, you know.
Indecent exposure, naked band on stage.
Right. So we get on
really
stage,
get
and we're
parents mad.
playing, and Shep's calling the cops, and they get there. By the time they get there, the heat of the body had fogged up all the clear plastic suits, and there was nothing showing at
They
all.
walked in and walked out.
And we realized we couldn't get arrested in Los Angeles, so we moved to Detroit, and that's where actually the band.
That's where it started. That's
took off.
actually, I remember the line, we said, we can't even get arrested here. That was the only time we tried.
Yeah, and Detroit was the first place that you felt the public was into it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Detroit was a great rock and roll city. They really
It was.
got it.
It's still the hard rock city of America. Is Detroit? That's a very industrial city. They want their music as hard as you know. They all work in the factories, and they want the music to be like that.
Interesting, very interesting. Because like in the UK, have Liverpool and Detroit,
exactly,
both industrial cities.
Exactly.
That's interesting. That was a little bit more of the partnership, the trust thing that you have between both of you, because it's so amazing of not having a single contract in all these years. And tell us, how do you work when, I know they are not big, but when small disagreements happen, how do you manage those?
Yeah, you know, it's Shep and I have been on the same page for 55 years, pretty much, you know. And when I first met Shep, I said, I never want to know anything about business. I said, I don't want to know how much money we make. I don't want to know how much we pay our band. I don't want to know how much anything. At the end of the year, tell me how we did. And that's very unusual. But I couldn't sit around worrying about, oh, let me see if my fifth of the T-shirt is going to be the. I said, I don't care about that. I don't care about all this other stuff. I care about getting up on the stage and just doing the show and making the show as great as we can. He said, okay. After that, I just said, you know, he'd say, hey, we're going to do this. And I go, okay. I never questioned anything because I figured he's as good at what he does as what I do. So why would I question him?
And same way for me. I mean, I have full faith in Alice when he gets up on that stage that he's going to do his job, and we just trust each other. I think it's a matter of trust and also honesty. We're very honest with each other. If I have a problem with something, I say it. If he has a problem with something, he says it. We don't take it personally. We realize it's in a professional capacity, and the trust is really We're very lucky to have each other because I think it's rare in business and in life to have 50 years of trust with someone.
Even in the beginning,
Luckily it worked.
even in the beginning, you felt that
Yeah.
that was the way to go.
Right from the first day
Because it's easier looking back and think, oh, it's been like that, so let's do
Okay,
it.
this was our first experience with Shep Gordon as a manager. The day before, we met Frank Zappa. Frank Zappa wanted to sign us to his record company. He was the only one that wanted to sign us. And so we said, okay, we'll come over and sign the contracts tomorrow. Well, the night before is when we met Shep. And he became our manager. So the next day we showed up, there's Frank Zappa, there's his manager, and there's all the people. They had it all worked out of who we were going to be. And they said, who's this guy? And I said, oh, that's Shep, he's our manager. They said, you didn't have a manager yesterday. And I said, yeah, we met him last night. So you have to, at the time, 1968, Frank Zappa's manager, Herbie Cohen, threw out a number that astounded us. He says, well, you know, we'll give him $30,000 to get going. When we heard that, that was like saying $3 million, okay? And we looked at each other and went, oh my God, this is going to be amazing, $30,000, this is great. So Shep goes into the room with Herbie Cohen, and when he comes out, I looked at him, I went, 30,000? He goes, no, I took 3. And I went, okay, you've been our manager for one time and you lost $27,000 in one meeting? And he goes, no. He says, Herbie Cohen wanted to give you $30,000 for publishing, for writing, for all. We had no idea what publishing was. It's where all the money is. And so Shep says, if he offered $30,000, it's worth $3 million. So I took $3,000, and we keep the publishing. And we all went, okay. But there was a question mark there. When he comes back out and says, no, I only took $3,000, I went, what? But I'm not understanding the business. Now, if you own the publishing of your own songs, 30 albums later, it's pretty amazing. And Shep saw that the minute you walked into the meeting with the guy.
Yeah, I was a poker player, so I didn't know anything about music, but I knew if this guy wanted to give us that much, it had to be worth a lot more.
And how did you figure out it was the publishing part of that would be like?
Because we needed the record deal, but we didn't. The publishing was an ancillary, right?
And
I didn't know how valuable it was.
3,000 was a lot of money.
Yeah, it was a lot of money. Yeah. Yeah.
Wow, amazing story, genius. And okay, another question, going back to the theatrical part of the performance. On stage, are you more like a musician, more like a storyteller, an actor? What kind of persona?
It's all of that. You know, first of all, people would think that the band, when we go into rehearsal, a 5-hour rehearsal, 4 hours of that is on the music. If you don't have the cake, which is the music, you can't put the icing on it. So the music is, we were up against Led Zeppelin, we were up against the Stones. So our band had to be really good. 4 hours of just pounding those songs until they were perfect. Same thing today. The big part of our rehearsal, if we're doing a new show, is all on the music. When the band kills it musically, then we start going, okay, now, how do we decorate this? Yeah. Shep and I then go in, start looking at it and saying, okay, now, this song here, this song here, this song here. So yeah, I have to be an actor. I have to be a stage actor. I have to be a singer first. And then make it all kind of look like it all works together. So it's doing 5 things at once, but at the same time, it just feels natural to me to do that, you know. And I always I always surround myself with the best band in the world, you know. In fact, my guitar player right there, stand up, Hurricane Nita Strauss. Nita was voted Guitarist of the Decade in Record Magazine. She is a force field unto herself. Cheryl, my wife, Cheryl, could you stand up? Cheryl plays all the characters in the show. In this show, she plays Marie Antoinette, where she puts me in the guillotine, and she does the whip dance in this, but she's been doing these things for 50 years in the show, and still does it better than anybody could do it. And really, I mean, the great thing for me is the fact that my wife and I are in the same show for 50 years, and people say, well, when you tour, isn't it awful to leave home? And I go, no, we're home. I just take, the house is a house. We're home. So I take home with me. And luckily, she's a road rat like I am. So we both, we miss the grandkids and everything and the kids, but half of our life is on the road.
That's amazing.
We still do 100 cities a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing. And so there was an old story of the theatrical helping to increase or compensate for the original lack of formal music training from your band, right?
Well, that was the thing. The fact that we would add theatrics to the music, immediately they went, okay, the visual sense is a lot more important than the hearing sense. You see something first, and then you hear it. So we were kind of, to the critics and all the other people, oh yeah, their show is great and everything, but they're really not great players. They're not really good musicians. That pushed us even further, pushed us harder, until all of a sudden people like John Lennon was saying, oh, my favorite song is Elected by Alice Cooper. And Bob Dylan was saying, oh yeah, my favorite, or one of America's most unknown songwriters is Alice Cooper. When you get people like that talking about you, you suddenly get a pedigree. And people look at your records and they're going, wait a minute, they're selling 50 million records. That's not the show, that's the music. And that's what we had to overcome. It took us a lot longer to overcome, but that did set up bands like Kiss. Bands like Kiss and bands like that. Then there was a band that had already been theatrical and sold records. So now Kiss could do that. And they were, they came to us, we told them where to buy their eye makeup. They were no surprise to us. Kiss weren't, but I expected Bowie and people like that to follow from what we were doing.
Oh, very interesting. And also about the music, I was thinking, How You Gonna See Me Now, one of your main hits, I think.
Yes.
And it's totally different because it's a very light-hearted, very open. It's like you're opening your heart to the world in a way.
Well, it was generally written for that lady back there that I introduced, Cheryl.
Oh.
We had been married 5 years, and now I was an alcoholic, but I was an invisible one. I was a highly, active, I never missed a line in a show. I never missed a show. If I was acting, I knew all my lines. But I was drinking all day. And I was never drunk. I was always on this little golden Dean Martin buzz all the time. So when I finally did go into the hospital and came out sober, the thought came to me, Cheryl has never met me sober. What if she doesn't like me? And the song, How You Gonna See Me Now, was about that. How are you gonna see me now? Are you still going to love this person that you've never met before? So that's why how that song was built.
It worked for Sharon, it worked for the whole audience of the world as well.
Right. Almost all the ballads ended up being about Cheryl.
Oh, that's amazing. Oh, great. And tell us about how you picked Bob Ezren as your producer.
Well, we realized we needed a hit record if we were going to keep the journey going and keep growing. And we talked about who made the best records of where there wasn't really an artist who, you know, the Beatles were the Beatles. They made great records because they were the Beatles. So we looked for who made great records with a band that nobody cared about or nobody gave credit to. And there was a group called the Guess Who from Canada who had made these amazing records, American Woman, some really big, they had...
But nobody knew what they looked
Nobody
like.
knew what it looked
They were
like.
just a
Nobody
great
ever went to a
recording band.
concert. They were just
Yeah.
a great recording band. So we found out who the person was who made those records. And it was a fellow named Jack Richardson up in Canada. And we went up, my partner and I went up and waited outside his office until he would see us. And he basically tried to dish us. But he had a young man named Bob Ezren who had just come to work for him. And he gave Bob Ezren the job of getting rid of us. And Bob ended up coming to see Alice in New York and fell in love with Alice and talked Jack Richardson into doing the album.
It was funny. Bob came to the show at Max's Kansas City, which was like the ultra hip show in New York. And it was one of those shows that we just destroyed the place. And Bob came back to Jack Richardson and he says, okay, I know I'm fired, but I signed them. And Jack went, we're trying to get rid of them. And he says, for your punishment, you have to produce them.
And Schools
The
Out
next
came
5
out of that.
albums were platinum albums. So Bob came in and retaught us how to write a song. We already had a certain knack for writing songs, but he was the one that came in and said, yeah, but if we took this out, this, and for some reason we listened to him. And the first album we did with them, Love It to Death album, hit record, and then Killer hit record, School's Out hit record, $Billion Babies. Every record got bigger and bigger and bigger. And Bob ended up being a bigger producer than Jack Richardson. You know.
Bob did Pink Floyd, The Wall, the Kiss records.
Aerosmith. He
So
did
you
everybody.
made Bob.
Yeah. So
And
Bob
made
made
you.
us and we made Bob.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Alice still works with Bob.
Oh, really?
Today, 50 years later.
Yeah.
Wow.
I work with Bob and I've done 20 albums with him now. You know.
So our team has been together 50 years. It's pretty amazing in this world today.
Yeah, there's a loyalty that
Yeah.
not many businesses or artists have.
Well,
that
and
kind
it
of
wouldn't.
loyalty.
We wouldn't unless it worked, but it works. Whatever the combination, whatever the chemistry is between Ezren and Shep and I, it works. And why change it if it works? You know, I mean, it's generally at 77, you're not out doing 100 cities a year and making our last last 2 records were #1. You know, so I mean, that I give a lot of credit to Bob Ezren. Knows how to tweak it and make it really work.
This weekend, Alice is headlining the Blues Festival, Rock Festival. The next night is Deep Purple, who Bob also produces. So he's hit a lot of home runs.
Yeah.
But it's the same thing. It's really trust. I don't think we've ever had a contract with Bob either.
No.
Oh, no?
Yeah, never signed a
No.
contract. We decide what the deal is. We
Wow.
tell the record company.
We're the anti-contract
Yeah.
guys.
You're probably famous for that.
Well, I mean, we trust we trust who they are. We trust that person who they are, rather than what they are on paper.
No, that's very courageous. And you think there's an album in your catalog that's like underrated or maybe misunderstood?
You know, people always ask me my favorite album, and it's like picking your favorite child. You know, because they all represented a different period of your life.
Yeah, but
each one of
something
those
that
albums.
people don't know so much, maybe.
Yeah. Well, there was some albums that I did that I don't remember doing. I don't remember. Right, there were 4 albums that literally I went through this period of rock starism, where it was cocaine and it was alcohol and it was oblivious. And those albums did not do great, but for some reason, the fans loved those albums.
And by the way, those albums Bob Ezren didn't do.
Didn't do. Those were albums that, I mean...
And it was during that time period where I wasn't managing Alice because we both said, we're not going to help hurt you. We're not going to make your career so you can hurt yourself.
I was, we were in the
Tell us a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
I think it's important
Yeah.
to know when to
but
say no as well.
That meant a lot to me because I understood that. I needed to go out on my own and fail. Because it did show me that drugs did not work. You know, I mean, they were totally drug-fueled albums, and I quit. When I quit, we just, you know, we didn't say anything. I just said, okay, Shep, I quit.
I remember
and I said, okay, what are we going to do next?
You called me up from the hospital. I remember the day really well, and said, I'm in the hospital. I'm done with it. Do you want to come back? And I said, of course. Are you kidding?
Yeah.
And same thing with Ezren. But both of us we didn't want to help Alice make money to kill himself.
If you
It
lived
wasn't
in
what
Los
we-
Angeles, 1978 to 1985, you were in the great Los Angeles cocaine blizzard. Because that's what it was. It was everywhere. And you couldn't avoid it. It was right in your face. And I mean, you know, I quit drinking and started doing something else that was worse. And then, you know, but you learn from it. Now when I talk to kids about drugs and alcohol, you know, God put me through that so I could actually talk to them out of reality. They say, yeah, but, you know, you never did. I go, no, I got high with the best of them. I got high with Jimi Hendrix and John Lennon and all the guys that died at 27 years old were all my best friends, Jim Morrison. I said, so I can talk from authority that it doesn't work.
And he gave up drugs and alcohol for a worse addiction, golf.
Golf. Yeah, I was going to ask.
It's a horrible thing. Don't start. There's no end to it.
I've heard people. I've heard you saying golf saved me, and I heard you saying God saved me.
Yes.
I think it's a double.
Well, you know, it was a miraculous thing. I know there was a lot of prayer going on when I was in the hospital. When I came out of the hospital, I thought, tomorrow is going to be hell. I'm going to get up and I'm going to want a beer and I'm going to want to... I got up the next morning and I felt great and I didn't reach for a beer. I just went, okay, well, tomorrow is going to be horrible. 42 years later, I've never had any desire to drink or take a drug. And the doctors even said, well, I mean, even the doctors said, okay, that's a biblical miracle because you are the classic alcoholic and you've never hidden. No, I said, no. You know, it was taken away from me. And I just went, I know my willpower. I'm not a willpower guy. So it was a miracle. And I stand by that. You know, I go, I am not a cured alcoholic. I'm a healed alcoholic.
Wow.
One of my ironic memories is the first time he came out of the hospital, the first show we did. I went with him to the show and I opened up the suite to his hotel room and there was a bottle of champagne from the record company.
Every place I go, there's a bottle of champagne.
No, he just gave up drinking. Hello.
Wow. Amazing, amazing. And when did it hit you that you became a legend? That you really...
I think if you survive, you become a legend. If you survive rock and roll, those eras.
But there must have been a moment that stuff were different.
You know, it is. I kind of divorce myself a lot from Alice. It's so funny because when I'm in the public, it's fine. When I'm at home or coaching Little League baseball or being, just being dad and granddad, people have to remind me that I'm Alice Cooper. Because I keep forgetting it until I get on tour, then I'm Alice Cooper.
The only time he's really Alice Cooper is on stage.
Yeah.
When he's not on stage, and I think that's what drives artists to keep doing great work. The ones that don't do the great work are the ones who think of themselves as legends. And I think that's one of the jobs of a manager, although I've never had to do it with Alice, I've had to do it with other acts, is remind them that it's a blessing and a gift. And once you start to think, I used to tell artists, there's so many artists who get irritated when someone comes up to ask them for an autograph because they're such an important person that they shouldn't be bothered. And I always would say to them, I'd whisper, the time to get annoyed is when they don't ask you for the autograph.
Yeah.
Be grateful that they're asking, and Alice has never forgotten that.
If you're in the public, you belong to the public. They made you. So how dare you not sign your name? Or how dare you not take a picture with? And yet I know guys that just will not do that. And I go, wow, it's like you're slitting your own throat there. Yeah. Everybody networks, And they say, well, what a jerk that guy was. Yeah. He wouldn't sign my autograph for my son,
Yeah. So I think one of the things that saves an artist is not thinking of themselves as a legend. I mean, we work as hard today as we did back in '68 to keep Alice vibrant and alive. We still, the morning the charts come out, we still jump to see the charts. We don't think about being a big shot. And I think that's really what keeps you happy.
We have a saying in rock and roll: never believe your own hype.
Yeah. Brilliant.
No, it's funny because, when I tell my band, I said, when you're on stage, I want you reeking of ego, because that audience wants you to be bigger than life. The audience wants you to be this thing that they could never achieve. When you're off stage, just the opposite. Leave the ego on stage. Because you do need the ego on stage. If you go up there and you're just kind of, oh, gee, I hope you like us tonight, but, the audience goes, oh, what a nice puppy that is, But if you go up there and you're giant and you're just like this, they love that. They want you to be that.
When did that dawn on you? When did you get that insight? In the beginning?
I think that it's something that if you ask anybody on the street, what's the greatest job in the world? To a business guy, he'll say rock star. Because, wow, rock stars get to do anything they want to do, right? Well, it's it sounds really appealing and everything like that, but it's like any other job. I tell young bands all the time, if you make a hit record, if you make 2 hit records, now you're in the business. Well, now it gets hard. Now it's a job, and you have to put everything in place. You have to put your ego in place. You have to put your everything in order. And if you can do that, you can survive.
Great. I'm going to go for our final question now and open later for the audience a few
no
questions
math
as well.
questions, okay?
Yeah, no math questions. Just to close, how would both, it's for Alice, but it's for both of you actually, how would you like to be remembered for the future? How would you like, and what you feel is the most important part of your legacy?
I think we're probably Bialystok and Bloom.
Yeah. I'd like to be a good dad, be known as a good father. That's really, I have a 5-year-old who you all got to see up here.
And I think we'll probably go down as sort of the Barnum and Bailey or the Ziegfeld of the trade. Only because we brought that to the music. We didn't bring rock and roll to rock and roll. That was already there. What we brought was seeing it and hearing it at the same time. So I mean, if that's our, I know what my gravestone is going to be. It's going to be, I'm standing right behind you.
That's amazing. That's great. And another one that I remembered. There have been great documentaries, both Supermensch and Super Duper. Funny, both have super in the name. Amazing documentaries. I highly recommend for everybody if they don't see. It's very amazing films. In their own, they're amazing films.
Well, I was so glad that somebody did one on Shep. I mean, yeah, I'm the figurehead of the whole thing. But in the world of management, Shep is me. In the world of management, he's considered the guy. You know, other managers come to Shep to ask him what to do. And it's because Shep goes, it's very simple. You be honest, and you be real, and you don't slit anybody's throat. Because if you leave a trail of blood, it's, you know, it just doesn't work. You'll stay in this business a long time being more honest than you will being a jerk and a crook.
Thank you.
And I was going to ask do you know if there are any plans of any biopic, any film about your story, your history?
We're hoping.
Yeah.
Not in the works yet, but we're hoping.
I told Johnny Depp if he was just better looking, he could play me.
Oh, let's use AI for that. Amazing. Great. So I would like to open for the questions for the audience.
Posso levar o seu? Nira, você tinha feito já uma pergunta, lembra? É. Espera aí só um minuto, porque ela já estava encomendada.
That was great, thank you. I have two questions, one for Alison and for Alice Cooper, and one for you, Shep. For Alice is how was when you did your concert in Israel, right? It was your time in 2016 that you went to Israel. And for Shep, since you are a Jewish person, right? How are you feeling the growth of anti-Semitism in the world and how it affects you, if it does?
Well, we've only played Israel once, and we played Tel Aviv. And, you know, being Christian, I could not wait to get to Jerusalem. My wife and I, we could have spent 2 weeks there just seeing all the sights, because, I mean, it's everything. It brings the Bible to life when you go to Jerusalem, because you see all of the places, the real places. And it was a total spiritual trip for us. Cheryl's father does Holy Land tours. So she'd been there, how many times, Cheryl? 5 times? Four times. When she was a little girl, all the way up. But, you know, this is the first time we went together, and it was really a great experience for us, you know. And Tel Aviv is just sort of the opposite. Tel Aviv is Vegas. But Jerusalem is something, yeah.
Anti-Semitism today scares me. Scares me for my son more than me. It's hard for me to believe in America, where I live, to see the rise of it. It's almost, I can't understand it. I wish there was something I could do to be part of the solution, but it's scary. It's really, I talk about it and think about it every day, and it's scary.
Such a pleasure to meet you. Back in 2011, I was driving a road trip in California, and I found it hard to believe that it seemed it was you who presented the show in the radio. Do you still do it? And does anyone ever call you Vincent?
Do you still do the radio show?
Oh, yeah.
Does anybody call you Vincent?
Yeah, I do. I've been doing the radio show for 22 years now, and it's called Alice's Attic. So when you come to the radio show, you're coming up into my attic. And we try to make the radio show as theatrical as the stage show. In fact, the next stage show is going to be Alice's Attic. So when you come to the show, you actually come into my attic, you know. And the only person that calls me Vince is Keith Richards. Yeah, and is Vinny. So how long has it been since you've had a drink? I go, well, 42 years. He goes, begs the question, why? And then he stumbles off. And he will not call me Alice.
It's funny, funny you should ask that, because that's sort of my filter. When someone calls me up and says, Vince is my good friend, and he told me, and I just hang up the phone.
Yeah.
Because nobody calls him Vince, unless they don't know him. So it really is my filter.
Johnny's Captain Jack is totally built on Keith Richards. You know, it's this, you know, this sort of thing, you know. And the funny thing is my wife said, she says, you know, with all of the wars and all of the disease and all of the death, what kind of a world are we going to leave Keith Richards?
Hello, Alice. I saw an interview once where you were saying that you have many ideas for all her stories and all her movies. You tell your daughter, but you don't have the time to move on with them. So I was wondering, do you have the intention to show this someday to people? Because I believe many people would like to check out your ideas for movies. And
you know,
I brought a gift to you, if you don't mind me giving to you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I grew up on horror movies. I was a kid when all those great 50s awful black and white horror movies came out, and we saw all of them. And for some reason, I always thought of them as being comedies. I couldn't stop laughing. You know, the more horror it was, the funnier it got to me. You know, I think the only movie that was ever made that didn't have a sense of humor was The Exorcist. And it was because of demon possession, which is documented. That really does happen. When you take a little girl, a sweet little girl, and she becomes the most horrific thing on the planet, it doesn't speak to your intellect, it speaks to your soul. And you start going, this is just the most horrific thing ever. That's why that movie was so scary. My favorite horror movie of all time was Salem's Lot, with made back with James Mason back in the 70s. But, you know, if a horror movie, I got to play Freddy Krueger's father in one movie, and, you know, it's fun to play in those movies. The hardest part is not laughing. So Freddy Krueger's going to put a razor blade through my eye in 3D. And the hardest part was both of us, okay, go ahead. And he'd start laughing. And I go, okay, let's take another picture. And he'd get about here, and I go, okay, wait. And it took a day to shoot that because we couldn't stop laughing at the most horrific part of the movie. So that's why I see the comedy in horror.
Hi, my question is for both of you. You guys came out in the golden age of rock. You had so many incredible bands. Is there anyone right now that excites you, that you think it's going to be something bigger, newer, something different?
There's a bunch of young bands. You know, Gene Simmons said rock is dead. And that may be true on a financial thing. It used to be here. And rock and roll, I mean, everything was about rock for a really long time. And then hip-hop came along, and all the hip-hop shows are basically Vegas shows. They're all shows you'd see in Vegas. They're so produced. And I don't really think they're rock and roll. You know, could you really put, you know, this Rihanna with The Who? It's two different worlds. So the good thing about what rock is right now is that now rock is back to being the kids that didn't get invited to the party. There's a bunch of young kids now that are up against hip-hop, and they're losing. That's great for rock and roll, because that's when rock becomes rebellious again and becomes tough, and because, you know, angst-driven. That's how rock started. So I think rock's in a good place right now. You know, there was a band from Ireland called the Stripes, young band, 18-year-old kids, not the White Stripes, but just the Stripes. And they were amazing, you know. There are certain bands out there that bring it every night. Green Day brings it every night. You know, the Foo Fighters bring it every night. Those are the bands, the real rock and roll bands that you know, that really get up on stage and give you a show.
Hi, hello. Thanks so much for coming here to answer our humble questions. I wonder, there's a song called All the Young Girls Love Alice by Bernie Taupin and Elton John, and it was told that the song was made for you, and I wonder if you could tell us why.
I didn't get any of that.
Bernie Taupin and the song All the Young Girls was made for you. They scored it, but
I tell everybody that. Bernie was my best friend. And so Bernie Taupin and I, you know, being both lyricists, when I heard the song All the Young Girls Love Alice, I went, oh, that's about me. Because Bernie wrote it, you know. And so I always will take the credit for that, you know. But the funny thing is when you're working with Bernie, when I got out of the hospital, we did an album called From the Inside. And I was telling him about all the characters in the hospital that were so bizarre and so out of their minds. And we wrote an album about each one of those characters. And when you're writing with another lyricist, what you want to do is write a line and end it with a word that they can't rhyme with. So he ended one of the lines with orange. And I went, orange? You mean like a door hinge? And he goes, oh, yeah. So I left him with the word month. There's no rhyme for month. Try it for the rest of your life. You're never going to find another rhyme for the word month. So it was kind of a ping pong game back and forth of us writing lyrics. And I just saw Bernie, his 75th birthday, and he's doing great.
Hello, Alice. My name is Neymar. I'm from the legendary Alice Cooper group on Facebook.
oh,
Okay.
Oh.
I'd like to ask you a question about your initial solo career albums, because the sound changed a lot when you started making those albums, like Welcome to My Nightmare, Goes to Hell, Lace and Whiskey and Soul. Was it intentional? Did you really want to change it to a more softer sound when you made those albums, or it just happened like that?
You know, they just happened. They honestly just happened. And Bob Ezren and I have the sensibility to not make them sound overproduced or to make them sound high-tech. I always want the band to go into the studio. Generally, a band will go in the studio and they put the drums down, then they put the bass on it, then they put the guitars on it, then they put the keyboards, and then they do the vocal. I want my bands to play live in the studio. So we go in the studio, learn the song, and I have so much trust in my band that we work off those live tracks. I want them live in the studio, and then I come in and do the vocal. Now, the funny thing was, we just did an album with the original band. I haven't worked with them for 50 years. Dennis Dunaway and Mike, all the guys that did Schools Out and those. And it sounded exactly like 1975. And it's without trying. That's just the way they play. And I didn't want to change that. So the new album called The Revenge of Alice Cooper is coming out, I think, in July.
Yeah.
And people are going to be shocked when they hear it, because it sounds exactly like the album that should have come out after Billion Dollar Babies, when we broke up right after that. So I'm very proud of the original band. They're amazing. Now, we didn't have to try to make them sound like that. They just sound like that.
Great. Thank you, everybody. Unfortunately,
Thank you
we
all.
don't have time for any more questions. We could stay here on and on. And consegue mais uma?
Que nem eu prometi, não, a gente não vai ter tempo para entregar presente, desculpa, depois vocês podem deixar, eu me comprometo a entregar para ele. Para não deixar todo mundo sem uma foto, uma coisa assim, eu vou pedir para eles ficarem de pé aqui, tá? Peço para vocês ficarem sentados para todo mundo poder aparecer, e o Abner vai tirar uma foto, eu juro que eu vou mandar para todo mundo, porque eu tenho e-mail de todo mundo vai receber, tá bom?
Thank
Thank you, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody. Obrigado, pessoal.